In other news, Iran finally announcing the results of its presidential race on Saturday, with Ibrahim Raisi winning in a landslide. But all around the world, Raisi's name sounding alarms, and not just because he supports Iran's nuclearization, but rather it's because Raisi, who's seen as Ayatollah Khamenei's protege, has also earned several other names, including the executioner and the Butcher of Tehran. Rights group Amnesty International, for one, even calling for Raisi to be investigated for crimes against humanity, while Israeli officials are likewise calling for the West to wake up.
This weekend, Iran chose a new president, Ibrahim Raisi. Of all the people that Khamenei could have chosen, he chose the hangman of Tehran, the man infamous among Iranians and across the world for leading the death committees, which executed thousands of innocent Iranian citizens throughout the years. Raisi's selection is, I would say, the last chance for the world powers to wake up before returning to the nuclear agreement and to understand who they're doing business with. These guys are murderers, mass murderers. A regime of brutal hangmen must never be allowed to have weapons of mass destruction that will enable it to not to kill thousands but millions. Israel's position will not change on this.
Still, and even while lamenting that Iranians were likely also denied a fair election, United States officials are saying that they'll continue indirect talks in Vienna on returning to the JCPOA nuclear deal. Joining me with more is research fellow at the International Institute for Counterterrorism at the IDC Herzliya, Dr. Fadi Essmaeel. Dr. Essmaeel, thank you so much for being with us. Now let's start with Raisi. What can you tell us about him, and what kind of president do you think he'll be?
Thank you for having me. Well, everything that you said in the opening is already known. The man wasn't named the hangman of Tehran for no reason. He is an ultra hardliner, which is actually a logical choice right now because the world has changed for Iran. With the change of the administration in Washington, D.C., they have less of a need of displaying flexibility or leniency towards the West. So choosing there's a point I want to make here. We say those words, hardliner and more moderate, and they're all the same school. So this is a point that sometimes I fall. It's a mistake I sometimes make when I refer to them by those terms. We have to understand all of these presidents, one after the other, are actually officials who work for the supreme leader. And they all come from exactly the same school, but they have different images in the West and different backgrounds in terms of the operational experience that they bring with them. So when we have a change in so-called in a guy or in an approach or in a in the president, it's really a message from the supreme leadership, the mullahs who actually run Iran. It's a message to the rest of the world. In terms of the policy in principle is the same. It's just the tone, the music will change. Raisi is definitely a conductor, if we keep on with that, the metaphor for the music, is definitely a conductor that uses very, very, very strong crescendos and is not someone who projects an image of moderate policies like perhaps some people thought other presidents did. In the end, Iran is Iran. And the revolution is a revolution. This is a point that's very important to see. Right now, we have in the Middle East a situation where America is pulling out its resources. Recently, we've heard that the U.S. is removing some additional removal of Patriot missile batteries that were supposed to protect the Gulf. And we haven't even finished the negotiations yet. So in terms of Iran, it makes sense as good negotiators to actually harden their position. And the choice of this president, who was actually has been chosen before the elections even happened, is a message. It's within that logic.
All right. Well, so I want to come back in a moment to the United States and the JCPOA P5+1 powers. But for now, this election, I want to stay on Iran. This election had Iran's lowest voter turnout on record. Several candidates, including so-called reformists, as you called them, dropped out of the race at the last minute. Yet as the votes were tallied, Raisi won in a landslide. How much support does Raisi actually have amongst the general Iranian public? Does the public support him? And does that public support actually even matter? Is there anything that they can do if they disagree with him?
I think by now we know these so-called elections in these kinds of countries mean very little. How can you possibly know what the opinion of the public is when there is no freedom of opinion, of expression? I mean, people do what people have to do. We can't use those Western type of concepts to try and read these kinds of dictatorships. It just doesn't work. I think I spoke about this in a previous interview for ILTV. We have a tendency, which I always warn about, to use Western concepts to read other societies. That doesn't work. The idea of what the street wants right now in a dictatorship like that is of no consequence. It is only of consequence when the street rebels. And there's nobody here today in the world that will help or assist the Iranian street if some kind of Iranian spring will erupt. There's no force, no power in the world that will stand behind such a possible forces within the Iranian society. And this is why I think that we can still safely say that the street currently doesn't really matter much because there's nothing behind it.
So I want to move now back to Vienna, the talks in Vienna. Iran has surpassed 60% enrichment on uranium. Their centrifuges are getting more and more advanced every day. It's been proven that they intentionally hid evidence from UN inspectors and signatories to the JCPOA, and now Iran is voting for the hangman of Tehran in what is largely suspected to have been a rigged election. Yet the United States and Western powers are lifting sanctions, pulling troops and forces out of the Middle East, continuing nuclear negotiations. My question is, why do you think that that is the case? And is it still maybe as a devil's advocate, is that maybe still just the best option on the table?
Best for who? I mean, there was a smart man named Winston Churchill once said, appeasement is a policy where you feed the crocodiles, hope other people, hoping they will get to you last. I mean, there's always this, for lack of a better word, fantasy that some people have that if you appease somebody who is very aggressive, you will basically calm down the situation. Yeah, there are places where you want to be more moderate, more logical, more rational, more interactive with an adversary, and that might bring a calm to the situation. But we have experience with the Iranian regime. If you give them a little calm, they will simply expand and extend more. Is not, I don't know, for the life of me, I don't understand what history books people are looking at in DC that makes them think that withdrawing, look, we are withdrawing air defenses from the Gulf before even there is an agreement, even if it's a bad agreement. I don't understand the tactical logic of it.
Well, so I want to ask about Israel then, because again, if diplomacy, if de-escalation through these negotiations is not really an option, or at least not an effective one, does that leave Israel we have Israeli officials saying we have no other choice? What does that mean? What does that mean for the future of the region?
The only choice is be ready for whatever can happen. What can Israel now do? I mean, all this talk about military operations in Iran and like landing a blow to the Iranian nuclear project, all that, it was a fantasy right from the start, and it is still today. Anybody who looks at what the basic premises into such an operation could be, maybe the United States plus another power could do something about it that would push the Iranians a few years back. Israel by itself, no. I mean, we've seen how limited all the air power thing is vis-a-vis Gaza. And we've seen it in 2006 vis-a-vis Hezbollah in Lebanon. There are limits to the power of one state. Now, here's the other side of it. This is the bleak side, but I don't want to sound really negative. Here's the other side of it. The Iranians still are in very bad economic shape, although the easing of sanctions that might happen will give them a lot of leeway. That can happen. Still, the Gulf states are waking up. Only yesterday or today even, they have completed a very large exercise. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, and several countries. There is an awakening in those countries that do have the resources and do have the manpower, and who are like across the pond from Iran, to wake up and be ready to do things. And that is actually a good thing in the sense that from the standpoint of the Iranian, they are no longer seeing passive nations in front of them, but they're seeing active militaries waking up. So that is different. I mean, you have to understand.
I'd like to hope from everything that you're telling me that hopefully a creative solution can be brought forward that doesn't involve bloodshed or war or anything terrible like that. In the meantime, I guess we're going to have to see how the United States and Israel and everything moves forward. In the meantime, thank you again so much, Fadi Essmaeel, for joining us and for all of your insights and for sticking around with us. Everybody watching at home, again, if you'd like to see the extended interview between myself and Dr. Fadi Essmaeel, please go online to ILTV.tv or to our YouTube or Facebook pages. Thank you so much.